Hello everyone, Lunar Warfare. Welcome to week 5 of the Chaos Report, the weekly or bi-weekly Path of Exile series that will focus on the economy of the Softcore Challenge League. This week, I'll be taking a look at our unique item watch list and I'll be covering the current dominant farming strategy, Infinite Sustained Glaciers. As always, do keep in mind that these are educated guesses or predictions, and as such they might not be entirely accurate. Furthermore, I might miss a thing or two that seem obvious to many, and for that I apologize. It's hard to cover everything after all. In conclusion, invest at your own risk. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's jump right in. As a new first segment, we'll be taking a quick peek at some of the most interesting currencies that you should keep an eye on for this following week. Of course, this wouldn't be a real economy series without exalted prices and predictions, just like last week. Over this past week, the exalted ore prices have practically skyrocketed from a rather steady 155 chaos to over 170 chaos with no signs of stopping. As also predicted last week, this was a definite possibility due to the extremely multi-mod heavy meta we're currently in. The more players decide to do multi-mod an item, the more exalted orbs will be worth. Every single multi-modded foil, for example, requires about 5 to 6 exalted orbs to be properly crafted after all. This rise in price is definitely a common trend for exalted orbs at this point in the league, as this raise was also around the similar time during Synthesis. In Synthesis, the exalted orbs hit their high at 175 chaos. However, for Legion, we might see an even higher endpoint, as the league mechanic itself is devaluing the worth of chaos in comparison to exalted orbs faster than any previous league. I wouldn't be surprised to see 180 chaos plus in the next following week. Exalted orbs, as always, hold their value rather well, usually only fluctuating by a few dozen chaos at best. As such, this is a prime investment target, especially during such a high point in the economy. Another currency that has seen a similar drastic rise in popularity from last week that was equally predicted on last week's episode is the Alteration orb. In the past week, it has gone from its already high 5 alteration to chaos ratio to a staggering and never before seen 4 to 4.5 alts per chaos ratio. And this trend does not seem to be stopping anytime soon. Similarly to the exalted orbs, alteration orbs are the prime currency that is used for multi-modding. For each multi-modded item, thousands of alteration orbs will be used at average. With the prevalence of bow builds, 7-link elder weapons, and the advent of the melee dual-wield meta, there is no telling when the alteration orbs will reach their peak. Following that, I would advise, just like last week, switching up your loot filter a tiny bit to allow T2 jewelry rares to be shown, as they will be the most slot-efficient alteration shard providers. Oftentimes, you'll not fill up your inventory while you're out and about, and this is the perfect time to pick up these additional items, which you should try to make a color that doesn't pop out, just so it doesn't distract you from the real loot, of course. Doing this will give you about 5 to 6 alteration orbs per map, which can definitely be worthwhile if you're running 50 or so maps an hour. It's very easy change, it can help both SSF players, hardcore, as well as your average softcore Legion farmers, of course. The Annulment orbs featured last week have seen no notable changes, however. This is due to the fact that Annulment orbs are at a pretty constant usage point, which doesn't really increase as much as exalts or alteration orbs do with the amount of multi-modded items on the market. Instead of the Annulment orb, we'll be taking a quick peek at our favorite rerolling currency, the Divine Orb. The Divine Orb has seen a pretty steady increase since the beginning of the league and still shows no signs of stopping its stellar rise. It is another one of the currencies required for the multi-mod process, as with the multi-mods you cannot simply recraft a craft to get the perfect roll, as you can with normal ones. As such, any multi-modded weapon requires multiple Divine Orbs to properly get the wished for damage, attack speed, and quality numbers to push those physical DPS weapons just that extra bit higher in terms of capabilities. Since last week, the Divine Orbs have seen another price increase, coming from an already pretty high price point of 15 chaos to a staggering 17 to 18 chaos today. As for farming these orbs, you have many options, as they don't just simply drop, but you can also acquire them through a vendor recipe, which involves a 6-linked item. The new Sextant mods, monsters in area have a 5% chance to drop corrupted items, is a prime suspect for easy 6-links, as corrupted items have a 1 in 36 chance to drop 6-linked, provided they have the capability of being a 6-socketed item to begin with. Furthermore, the Palace map has the possibility to drop the Sephiroth divination card, which will hand you a full stack of divination orbs in completion. Additionally, as they count as T1 currency, they are also a prime candidate to drop from the hidden opulence chests in the Azurite mine. One last side note, with Divine Orbs costing 17 to 18 Chaos Orbs, that also means that any and all 6 linked items should be listed at least at the same price. Do not list your items below that point, as you can simply sell your 6 linked item to a vendor and sell the Divine Orb to make more money. If your 6 link doesn't sell before that price point, of course. With those currencies covered, let's move on to our unique item watch list, which we refined last week, and see how those items have shaken out since then, as well as their potential trajectories in the future. Our watch list currently features 7 unique items, but we might add or remove a few during this video as well. First up, as always, our beloved jewels, Tempered Flesh and Transcendent Flesh. Since last week, the Transcendent Flesh has continued its rather rapid course of rising to the top. It has gone from the already high 340 to 360 Chaos price point of last week to over 460 Chaos this week. As predicted, this jewel has been retaining its fair share of value since the leak start, and I don't expect it to fall drastically anytime soon. However, a slight dip is definitely in order, based on the previous price history of this item. As such, wait a little bit if you intend to mass purchase these, I would say. The Tempered Flesh, on the other hand, has seen absolutely no changes to last week, still sitting at around 20 Chaos and still being a fantastic and cheap choice for any Marauder or Duelist to get that extra free 75% crit multiplier. Same reminder as the last few weeks. That gets more and more important, of course, as the Transcendent Flesh continues to rise in price. If you are diligently running your temples, you might want to pick up a copy of the Tempered Flesh, as well as a vial of Transcendence for your T3 sacrifice rooms. Instead of hopelessly throwing in your belts and hoping for the minuscule chance to get your beloved Headhunter, you can guarantee yourself a very respectable profit for each run instead. This is due to the price of the Vial of Transcendence costing about 80 Chaos right now, and the Tempered Flesh only running you about 20 Chaos. You'll easily make a 350 plus Chaos profit for each time you run this, and if you've paid attention, this profit has actually risen by over 100 Chaos since last week. I absolutely recommend investing here. It's one of the easiest and fastest ways in the game to currently make a profit with such a large margin for any character. Moving on to Ryslatha's Coil has since last week seen a bit of a small resurgence, but has dipped slightly lower again in the last day or two. Many people have likely stopped adopting this build, as it isn't required for farming T2 maps. The damage is simply not necessary when fighting such low-level monsters, and as such, the build has seen a drastic descent over the past 2 weeks. For high-end players that rely on physical damage to kill their enemies, however, this build is still a prime choice, as it is the highest damage increase you can find in the belt slot. Perfectly rolled swans still go for a respectable amount, around 100 to 150 as of its current standings. This belt will likely retain a certain amount of value over the entire course of the league as well, simply due to the physical heavy meta we found ourselves in, and the sheer rarity of it. With no way to target farm and very low drop rates by itself, this is one of the hardest belts in the entire game to actively farm for. Yes, including the Headhunter. As a general trajectory, I would imagine this belt to slowly drop further, but still retain a decent amount of value throughout the league, at least compared to Synthesis, of course. I would predict a rough 30 Chaos low price point for this belt. Moving on to our beloved Flask, the Lion's Roar. After 4 weeks, the Lion's Roar has finally been beaten by all the rarer flasks in the game. It took a while, but as predicted, the Lion's Roar has found itself on rock bottom with a 15 Chaos price point. This flask is not really known to be a rare flask in any capacity, and as such the high price of the first few weeks were impossible to sustain, of course. Especially since farming the divination card, Earth Drinker, on the Dunes, Desert, and Desert Spring maps is an easy way to acquire it in large quantities. I don't really see a resurgence for this flask coming in the future either. Instead, I'm predicting that it will stay around this level for the remainder of the league, as the demand will still be rather high as many players need this flask for their builds. However, as the supply is equally as high, if not higher, we'll likely not see this flask rise above the 30 Chaos mark again. We'll be keeping an eye on it for another week, just to see if our predictions seem to hold any water. If they do, we'll be removing it from the watch list come next week. Good luck, Lion's Roar. The Paradoxica is continuing to follow our predictions to the letter, The Paradoxicas continued to slowly drop over the past week to a low price point of exactly 100 chaos, rising a slight bit above over the past day or so. It is still one of the best weapons for some of the new ascendancies, such as the Berserker and Slayer, and many builds those ascendancies like to run. As mentioned last week as well, it is also a good choice for melee elemental stacking builds, as the double damage mod it provides works beautifully with the high amount of flat damage that elemental builds can provide, especially with the newly added T1 elemental rules on weapons. I would no longer recommend hard farming this weapon, as the price point simply does not validate such efforts, however. If you still wish to acquire this weapon though, in either hardcore or SSF leagues for example, the Mastermind boss fight is your best bet, as it has a guaranteed drop chance for a random syndicate unique. For crafting advice on the Paradoxica, always prioritize physical damage increases, as well as attack speed. As for future prices, I would imagine the Paradoxica will continue to stick around the 100 to 150 chaos mark, with slight increases in drops depending on the current climate of the week. It'll likely remain one of the most expensive weapons this entire league though. Moving on to the Calm's Hard Body Armor. This favorite of all two-handed weapon wielders has dropped over the last week as we predicted, and has leveled out at about 210 chaos for roughly half a week now. As we talked about last week, the price drop is easily explainable by the high prices in the first place. As the price of an item increases, more and more people will start to farm for said item, which in turn drives supply up. If the demand stays the same, the prices will fall, as people will start to undercut each other for the fastest sell. This particular item has been my farming target for the past few weeks as well. However, with the recent price drops, I've decided to stop farming for it specifically. Not that it isn't profitable anymore, of course, but I thought it would be a good time for a change of scenery, as I've farmed Volcano for the past 3 weeks straight. Volcano is still my personal recommendation for farming this chest piece, however, if you would like to farm for it yourself. It is definitely still a worthwhile investment to farm this one, as the Calm's Heart will likely retain a decent percentage of its value, barring any unforeseen circumstances of course, throughout the entire league. The last item on our old watch list is of course the Nomad Studded Belt. This belt has seen a further drop in price and has since leveled out at about 30 chaos. As stated the previous weeks, the high price point comparatively to last league is likely due to the addition of the new Spectral Throw duo, Divide and Conquer, which finally makes Spectral Shield Throw a very viable physical-based projectile ability that has seen quite a lot of play in the recent little while. With the popularity of Impel-based builds, both melee and ranged, this build, for good reasons, is still one of the most popular in the current league, and will remain so for a little while longer at the very least. The only way to acquire this item is still through the Great Leader of the North Prophecy, and as such, if you intend to farm this one, you will have to perma-spam prophecies until you hit it. It seems that this belt has reached its bottom for now, as it has been remaining steady at the 30 chaos price point for quite some time. We'll continue to keep an eye on it for another week or two. I'm advising caution with investment into this item, until we get a more clear picture of how the meta will settle this league. One new item we'll be adding to the watch list from now on is the Cinder Swallow Urn Unique Flask. Mentioned a few times already in the various chaos reports, this unique flask has seen a very bumpy ride this league. It is one of the best DPS flasks in the game at the current time, as it can be used by pretty much any build, as long as you got a crit chance and some fire damage to ignite enemies. It's used by about 12% of all players, mostly Cyclone users, and it is still the most used ability in the game, and as such should be no surprise that it's one of the most expensive flasks in the entire game as well. Currently sitting at around 60 chaos, with some dips to the 50 chaos area, this flask has seen a rather steady rise if you look at the overall price picture of the first month. This item can only be acquired from the Syndicate Mastermind Katarina, and as such, has a certain rarity to it that other flasks, such as the Lion's Roll, cannot lay claim to. As a result, this item, with rising popularity, continued to gain a higher and higher price, where it's now at a point for us to take a closer look. The Cinder Swallow does not only offer one of the best DPS increases in the game for the Flask slot, but it also offers something no other Flask in the entire game can offer: choice. The Cinder Swallow comes with a Veiled mod, and as such can be customized to certain degrees. The most expensive versions of the Cinder Swallow include options such as percentage increased critical strike chance during Flask effect, as well as percentage increased movement speed during Flask effect. Due to the wide range of choices this flask can provide, ranging from crit to movement speed to life regen and many more different ones, it is rather easy to fit into nearly any build as an alternative to your normal silver flask, provided that you do not require the usual immunity rolls of the normal utility flasks. In conclusion, we'll be adding the Cinder Swallow onto our watch list to see how the price for this one continues to develop, as well as seeing if farming the Syndicate Mastermind, in addition to the drop chances for the Paradoxica, becomes valuable with the increased popularity of this flask. As for future predictions, I believe this flask will continue its slow but steady climb towards a higher price point for a little while. However, this flask can be very volatile, and as such I would not put 100% trust into this prediction. Now moving on to our third segment for this video, the good old meta-analysis. As pretty much everybody expected, we see a similar picture to last week. The majority of players are still playing Slayer and Trickster at a respective 43% and 19% each. Cyclone is still the most used skill with a usage stat of 49% of players, and ED, Contagion plus Blight being used by a combined 102% of all Tricksters. The 102% here indicate that many Tricksters are doubling up on that particular pairing, so they'll have both a 6-link setup for Essence Drain, as well as a 6-link setup for Blight or Val Blight. There have barely been any changes since last week in the main meta of the game. However, there's been one interesting development these past 3 weeks that has slowly crept up on us. The Deadeye Ascendancy has slowly but surely gone from a mere 3% usage to more than double at 6% plus. This might seem like an obvious trend, as more and more people will be able to acquire MF gear and simply ruffle stomp the T2 Glacier maps they're inevitably going to be running, of course. However, the most interesting part here is that 57% of all Deadeyes over level 95 have a Headhunter. Windripper, however, the main bow for item quantity builds, is only at 42%. Additionally, the unique jewels Inspired Learning, which are used in combination with the Headhunter to get as many rare buffs as possible, is also at a higher percentage than the main IQ bow, sitting at a respectable 45% of all Deadeyes. What this tells us is that more and more players are opting to set up a Deadeye for the 5 emblem farming, as well as the Legion farming on maps, as those benefit the most from the always popular setup of Headhunter plus double Inspired Learning. The longer the league goes on, I would imagine this percentage of Deadeye players to increase, once players have enough currency to fund such a high-end build. As for the Atlas analysis, most of the recommendations from the first 3 weeks still apply, as the meta hasn't seen any changes whatsoever, and as such I won't be repeating them here. Feel free to check out the last few episodes for that. The only caveat, of course, is that Volcano has been downgraded slightly, due to the loss of value in the Count's Heart in the last and this week. It's still very valuable to farm, of course, especially as the layout is very open and easy to run, but it's not as valuable as it has been these past few weeks. I'm personally opting to look for new opportunities, such as Precinct for the Exalted Orb cards, as they seem to continue their price rise, as mentioned at the beginning of the video. Usually at this point in the video, I'll be covering new, interesting, and engaging farming strategies that have crept up over the week and have seen new popularity. However, as this league is one of the most boring leagues of all time when it comes to the meta, I'll just quickly cover the current dominant farming strategy. I couldn't really find anything else. T2 Glacier farming. The basic setup for the T2 Glacier farming is to unfinish every other T2 and T3 map you can find on the Atlas using the Cartographer's Seal, which you can acquire by selling 3 times white, yellow, or red Cartographer's Sextants together with 1 Orb of Scouring, depending on the tier of map. White maps require white sextants, yellow maps require yellow sextants, and red maps obviously require a triple Pride Watcher's Eye to be sent directly to me in-game. I promise, it's the only way to seal red maps, so send them to me. Once that has been completed, the only T2 map that can possibly drop is Glacier, and all the T3 maps are uncompleted, so they cannot drop either. However, you're not quite done. There are 2 connecting T3 maps to Glacier, Leyline as well as Mausoleum. These can still drop, and actually have an increased drop chance if they are uncompleted. To get around this, you'll be aiming to use your T3 Shaper Orb on one of them. The other one will require the Elder Orb, which you can acquire after beating Shaper and finishing Zelna's questline up until that point. it is definitely possible to sustain Glacier with one of those maps still connected as a T3, in case you cannot kill Shaper or finish Zana's questline to that point, for whatever reason. However, the most valuable way is to set it up exactly as described here. Once you're done, your Atlas should have only one time T2 map completed, which is Glacier. It should have 0 T3 maps completed. Leyline and Mausoleum should be any other tier but 3. If all of those conditions have been fulfilled, you'll be able to enjoy your own personal hell, aka infinite sustained Glacier farming. Enjoy those Legion mechanics. Now for the last little segment, I always like to give some quick farming and or crafting tips for some lower econ players that are extremely valuable this week. First up, farming the delve areas is still extremely profitable, just like the previous leagues. Especially with the Gilded Sulfide Scarab prices being rather low still, it is extremely easy to get to decent depths and farm whatever areas you want to farm. I would recommend the Frozen Hollows as well as the Fungal Caverns as your main farming areas. The first dropping an assortment of serrated and prismatic fossils, the second dropping perfect and jagged fossils. These are some of the most common yet high value fossils, and as such should be fairly easy to acquire for anybody, regardless of depth and luck. Also, always keep in mind to save them up for a small while, until you have a bulk of 4 or more fossils to sell. This will allow you to ask for even higher prices when you offer them for sale. Similarly, delving in general is extremely valuable at the moment, as even resonators, specifically potent resonators, are worth 2 to 3 chaos each and require no actual depth to find. You can even find them in depth 10 to 15 areas if you really want to, including the normal pathways. You are not required to break into a fractured wall to find these resonators en masse. Crafting eye level 86 plus Colossal Tower Shields is still my preferred way of making a quick buck. Right now, dense fossils go for about 1 chaos each, and those are the only ones you require to properly craft a high armored tower shield. You can see how this works together with the previous mentioned tips. The base itself you can get for around 5 chaos as well. Try to aim for over 2000 armor with your crafts and rolls, which shouldn't take too many tries, of course RNG applies, and will net you about 20 chaos. Up to 100 chaos plus for every well-rolled shield above 2500 armor. Shields that reach above 3000 armor will sell for a dozen or more Exalted Orbs. However, those are obviously very rare. The opportunity cost for this is fairly low still, so I would recommend trying it out a few times and seeing if you might get lucky or if you enjoy this kind of crafting. My last tip is to simply farm Exalted Orb divination cards such as Abandoned Wealth, the Hoarder, and the Saint's Treasure, as they are becoming increasingly more valuable. Even though these are always valuable to farm, of course, the extremely high prices for Exalted Orbs are making these a very valuable target to farm for the next while, as Exalted Orbs are rapidly on the rise and show no signs of stopping. Good maps for these are Arsenal as well as Precinct. And with that last segment wrapped up, I'll be ending this week's Chaos Report. I hope this video was informative and you learned something from it that you can apply to your own game. Please let me know if I missed anything or you would have wanted me to talk about anything in specific that I might not have covered. Also, let me know what your personal predictions are going to be for these coming weeks. Furthermore, let me know if you'd like to see me cover a particular topic regarding Path of Exile. I'm always willing to explore new video hypes or add extra segments to this series. Lastly, give me some feedback on this new series. How did you enjoy it? Was this video too long? Should I cut specific parts, maybe the watch list or something? Or should I further elaborate specific topics to give more insight towards specific things? And of course, don't forget to subscribe. Hit the bell thingamajig notification, whatever that thing's called. Like, dislike the video. Check me out over on twitch.tv/lonewolf. You can find a link to my stream down below in the description as well. And with that, thanks for watching, and keep farming those axles.